Cheers. Zach Moore podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for listening. Really do appreciate Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. When we look back on our world and our place within our own world, a lot of times we think of the beginning of humans. We think of when the pyramids were built. We think of the Civil War. We think of stuff that happened a week ago. That's how we think of our world in most cases. One of the things that is fantastic about this planet in particular is the fact that it's been around for a good chunk of time. And only recently, in the last 150 years, have we actually discovered a lot more and learned a lot more about our planet. I think that it is part of the responsibility of a person who is living here to learn about the history. Even if you're somebody like myself who's not a freaking expert, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about most of the time, about 95%. And I have an interest in what has happened on this earth and kind of looking forward into the future to realize, because today I want to talk about how special and how just fantastic that the events of history in the past have translated to today. About 250 million years ago, an event happened. About 250, 255 is the suggestion. We're talking about a 5 million year difference. Around that time, there was a massive extinction to a level that has not since, nor before, happened to the level. We're talking the entire population was almost wiped out from this planet. You and I, not here. You're not able to watch this video on YouTube, listen to it on Apple Podcasts, watch it Spotify, listen to it on Spotify. That's not a reality. None of the stuff that gets created around you is here today. Even if it wasn't the entire species died because of this singular event. What if more died? How would that have affected where we are at today? If you look back, even if less had died, how would that impact us today? I don't know. These are questions, and hopefully, I would be able to get some kind of expert or somebody on the show to talk about this topic more because I think it's absolutely fascinating. And I think it's something that's very important to talk about. And one of the things that I did want to talk about is this very thing. And this is the Permian extinction. This is Britannica talking about the Permian extinction. I'm just going to read some of this for here to you, just so you kind of get a general overview of what this event is. Permian extinction, also called Permian Triassic extinction or end Permian extinction, a series of extinction pulses that contributed to the greatest mass extinction in Earth's history. Many geologists and paleontologists contend that the Permian extinction over the course of 15 million years during the latter part of the Permian period, so around 299 million to 252 million years ago. Others claim that the extinction was much more rapid, lasting about 200,000 years. Bulk of the species lost over a 20,000 year span. Permian extinction was characterized by the elimination of over, this is the big part, 95% of marine and 70% of terrestrial species. In addition, over half of all taxonomic families present at the time disappeared. Not going to look that up. I don't know what that one means. This ranks first in the severity of the 5 major extinction episodes that spanned geologic time. This is an event that happened somewhere around. I mean, I watched a bunch of little docs on this event that happened and just looking over, it seems from be around 255. Like, yeah, most of the videos that I saw was about 10, 15 years before that, or 255 and under. But anyways, moving on. I do think that this is an extraordinary event, and when you're thinking about the types of animals that were alive at this time too, it's not like we're dealing with just straight up regular dinosaurs at that point. Because when did the dinosaurs die? Let me look that one up. When did the dinosaurs die? Because that might have been when did the dinosaurs go extinct? That because about 65 million years ago. So there were still dinosaurs at this time. And when you think about this, this was 200 and at least 250 million years ago that this happened. And then, I mean, over 100 million years later, you have the end of the dinosaurs. So there must have been some crazy species because at this time, the other interesting thing about the Permian extinction is that there was a difference in the entire world at that point. The world was a completely different place. For example, around two at the very end of this, and throughout this entire period, as a matter of fact, the Earth was in Pangea. That's the time when Earth was hanging out. So very, very fascinating. Here's another article that I really wanted to read. Let's look at this one. This is The Great Permian Extinction When All Life on Earth Almost Vanished by Jackson Chambers and Julio Lacerda. This was posted on eartharchives.org. And I just want to read a big portion of this because it is super interesting. Talking about the reasons for this happening, the reasons why this happened, and why just suddenly, over a course of period, and how we know this as well. Over a course of period, animals were dying. It wasn't like one event where, up, an asteroid comes and boom, everything dies within the matter of 100 years or so. No, we have evidence over thousands and thousands and millions of years that these animals were dying out. It wasn't like it was one close event. And that's what I want to talk about. It almost killed all of the life on Earth. And here's where I want to start. During the Permian, Pangea, a large supercontinent, had formed and was surrounded by the large Panthalassic Ocean. The immense size of Pangea caused the interior portions of the continent to be cool and dry, while the coastal portions were typically warmer and damp. So I'm going to pull up a picture of Pangea just to kind of give an idea of this. Let's pick up a nice little pick of Pangea. All right, so that's kind of what we're looking at right here. This is what I want to see. There we go. There we go. Okay. So this is Pangea. And for those that are just listening, it is North America, South America, Africa, Antarctica, everything, as well as they list it here, Eurasia. It's all in this one thing, this one giant supercontinent. And as it faces the Earth, you can imagine if you're not on this thing, like I'm not thinking there's really any islands. If there are, they're very small, but this is a younger version of Earth, so the amount of volcanic activity, I don't know if what it was like at that time, if it was more or less. So maybe there was smaller. islands that were scattered around on the globe, but I think this single piece of mass, for the most part, was where everybody was chilling out at. That's where all the people were, and I mean, if you, it's hard to describe how big this is by land. Even if I give you a number, it's not going to be as large. And I don't even know if Pangea is the final form of it, because it over time it moved. Here's kind of where this is interesting as well. Increasing temperatures throughout the Permian allowed for a rapid diversification of organisms. Terrestrial plant life exploded and provided an important source of food for many land animals and allowed life on land to diversify. Then it talks about kind of the different animals that were there, talking about big body dragonflies because there was more oxygen available at the time. So much of the reptilian species were able to grow larger than the ones that we see today. Talking about big body mammals. Um, Talking about sauropsids. Here's this article that kind of starts off talking about what life like was on the earth at this time and talking about what was going on in the oceans and the shallow oceans reef were large and life among the reefs was diverse. Ammonites and brachiopods were very common. Little is known about life in the deeper parts of the Panthelastic Ocean because most fossil evidence is deeply buried, while cartilaginous fishes such as sharks and rays were common and true bony fishes were becoming more common. At the end of the Permian, conditions became unsuitable for life, and about 95% of marine species were eliminated, as well as 70% of terrestrial species in a very short period of time in geological terms. Keyword, geologic terms. Many plant species also went extinct. Fossil evidence that there was once vast cruciferous forests in modern-day Europe that died out in the Permian. I have talked about cruciferous vegetables on this podcast before. So maybe this is something that's similar. Coniferous. Maybe. Could be. I don't know. Check that other episode out. Because of the enormous number of species that became extinct, the Permian Triassic mass extinction is nicknamed the Great Dying, and its impacts are still noticeable to the day. Cause is still debated by scientists. It isn't clear what happened. Now, these are some of the believed causes as well. And there's a study that recently came out, which I'll talk about later. One possible cause of the extinction could have been a large volcanic event that produced flood basalts, known as Siberian traps. These events covered around 2 million square miles with lava, and it was one of the largest volcanic events in Earth's history. The eruptions may have caused large amounts of carbon dioxide to be released into the atmosphere and caused a large-scale global warming effect of more than 10 degrees Celsius on land and about 8 degrees Celsius on the ocean surface in a short period of time. The eruptions may have also caused acid aerosols and dust clouds to be released into the atmosphere, which blocked out the sun and prevented photosynthesis from occurring effectively, causing many food chains to collapse. So that's kind of one of the first things, and I did watch a documentary on this where that is one of the things, especially when you see these Siberian traps. Let's look these up. Siberian traps. It's a large region of volcanic rock known as Large Igneous Province in Siberia, Russia. Can we get so the extent of you can kind of see up here. This right here, you really should watch the video because you can see where the lava is. So there definitely was a lot of stuff happening on this. So very interesting. This is one of the things that they say could possibly be the thing. It was this big giant volcano that exploded. And I mean, like, this is one of the things that people say could have happened to the dinosaurs, although most people do believe that it was a meteor or some kind of thing that came from outer space, some kind of object that boom went into the surface. I think that is pretty settled. But talking about the Permian extinction, which once again took out the majority of life on Earth. I just want to make that point very clear. Like this Earth came real close to just being boop. And it wasn't like it was one event. Like even with this talking, the eruption covered around 2 million square kilometers with lava. One of the largest in Earth's history in terms of a volcanic eruption. This is something that we have seen before, like I said earlier, the with what? With the I lost my train of thought there. But getting back to the topic at hand. When it comes to the Permian extinction, you have to look at a couple of things. You have to look at what the causes are, right? You have to look at how did it even get there? Because like I said earlier, it was Pangea. It was if there was going to be some kind of event that would affect the entire world, it's much easier to do that when everybody's on one continent, when everybody's on one central place. And yeah, they're spread out very, very far and wide, but the only place for the land creatures to be, and this is why I believe it affected much more of the land creatures than it did the seas, even though it does say 95%. Let me go back up to that number. About 95% of all life was gone. Just just done. Just bye. 95% of marine species were eliminated. Yikes. Yikes. Onto another possible cause. The forming of the supercontinent Pangaea. When Pangaea was finally formed in the middle of the Permian, there was a substantial decrease in the area of shallow marine environments. These shallow environments were the most productive parts of the oceans and produced much of the oxygen on the planet. Without them, the planet may have seen a decrease in the amount of oxygen available. These areas were also home to many organisms that were the base of food chains. A decrease in those areas, in the area of these organisms' habitat, meant a decrease in the availability of food for the majority of marine organisms. The formation of Pangaea may have also had an effect on the ocean circulation, which in turn affected nutrient circulation in the oceans and may had also affected global weather patterns. That would greatly explain what happened with much of the marine wildlife, with a lot of that going. Because if you look at the food supply of the fish in the water, that goes away due to the increasing of temperatures because you have this one continent where everything's focused and all 360 degrees around it is water. That's going to mess up the climate because there's only one place for the sun to actually be on the ground or be hitting nothing that's not water. I do wonder, I mean, I did talk about it earlier, but the climate was definitely different at the time. I mean, I talked about the fact that there was a much bigger relationship between the amount of oxygen that was there compared to today. I don't know why I said relationship, but you get what I'm saying. There was more oxygen back then than there is today. I believe also carbon dioxide was down as well. Because if you imagine, probably only the middle section of Pangea, give or take a couple million miles, I'm not sure, that would be mostly wooded areas. That would mostly be the nice, cool climates, and the rest of it would kind of be colder. I'm not sure though. Another possible cause of the extinction is an impact event. The Permian extinction appears to have happened in two or three pulses of extinction. Two or more separate impacts could have possibly accounted for these pulses. Some possible evidence for impact events are meteorite fragments in Australia, rare shocked quartz in both Australia and Antarctica, and craters in Australia. Interesting. Interesting. If a meteor did impact Earth during this time, it is more than likely that it landed in the ocean. Since the ocean floor is recycled by tectonic activity every 200 million years, any evidence of the impact is likely gone. Well, that's an interesting last one. Well, how do you know that it happens every 200 million years? Tectonic activity. What the? So it's just gone? What the hell? All right. I did not expect it to end like that. There should be some evidence, like it sh should be. I mean, but you got to get to the bottom of the ocean. That's the issue. You can't just swim down there. In terms of storylines, the first one, volcano. That's pretty cool. A giant, massive volcano. Because we've heard, frankly, about the meteors and the asteroids and that kind of stuff. We know that we've heard that story before. That's not as exciting as a giant, a big ass, humongous volcano in Russia, no less. One of the hardest parts of the world. It's freaking cold up there, man. That's why they call it the Siberia trap. You ever heard about what goes on in Siberia? Coldness. That's what happens up there. And now you have the possibility that there was a massive volcano or volcanic explosion at that place. Frankly, I am not entirely certain what exactly is the number one thing or the number one like most supported of these particular instances. I do not know which one is. Yep, that's it. That's the correct one. Like the 100% or 99% of scientists think it's this one. I don't know. I think the most likely one is probably um something like I mean it could have been the volcano because I mean what this I do like about the volcano is this. The eruptions may have caused large amounts of carbon dioxide to be released into the atmosphere and caused a large-scale global warming effect, more than 10 degrees Celsius on land and 8 degrees Celsius on the ocean. That would have been pretty crazy because as an American, 10 degrees Celsius to Fahrenheit. Okay, that's a lot. That's pretty crazy. 50 degrees Fahrenheit. I know I'm a bloody American, but I do not know that calculation off the top of my head. But 50 degrees on land is pretty intense. We're talking about maybe going from, now this is over, what, 20,000 years? But still, this is something that over the course of that amount of time is going to have an effect. You're talking about over 500 years or over 100 years even. Each of your kids is getting exposed to a hotter and hotter climate. And 50 degrees in 20,000 years? Over generations and generations, that's going to have an effect. And it's going to get to a point where if you're at that equator line, you're getting burnt up. But if you're at the poles, the North or the South Pole, you're going to go from freezing and having a certain climate that's around you to it being pretty much completely gone with only a couple thousand years of time. So maybe your 10th grandchild or whatever is now all of a sudden having to deal with a summer. And back then, we're talking a couple 100 million years ago. They wasn't going to school back then. Like they didn't have any summer classes. They didn't have anything to worry about. They were just chilling. And if you have over a period of time so much change like that, because I would imagine another thing that would have happened if you increased the temperature is probably the weather cycle changed. Maybe it rained a little bit more. Maybe it snowed a little bit less. I'm not sure. But when you're talking about an event that took place over 20,000 years, like I've said multiple times, I would argue that the volcano is one of the strongest things that I could see. But let's see what the people at Stanford have to say. What caused Earth's biggest mass extinction? Scientists have debated until now what made Earth's oceans so inhospitable to life that some 96% of marine species died off at the end of the Permian period. Now, new research shows that the Great Dying was caused by global warming that left ocean animals unable to breathe. This is by Hannah Hickey, University of Washington, December 6, 2018. The largest extinction in Earth's history marked the end of the Permian period, some 252 million years ago. Long before dinosaurs, our planet was populated with plants and animals that were mostly obliterated after a series of massive volcanic eruptions in Siberia. So that's an interesting point. Planet was populated with plants and animals that are mostly obliterated after a series of massive volcanic eruptions in Siberia. Those Siberian traps is evidence of that. Fossils on ancient seafloor rocks display a thriving and diverse marine ecosystem, then a swath of corpses. Some 96% of marine species were wiped out. Yikes. What has been debated until now is exactly what made the oceans inhospitable to life. The high acidity of water, metal and sulfide poisoning, a complete lack of oxygen, or simply higher temperatures. New research from the University of Washington and Stanford University combines models of ocean conditions and animal metabolism with published lab data and paleoceanic records. This published December issue of Science. Okay. All right, let's go. Boom. You can see this right here. Warming and oxygen loss. Tropics. Okay. Here we go. The study builds on previous work led by Deutsch showing that as ocean warms, marine animals' metabolism speeds up, meaning they require more oxygen, while warmer water holds less. That earlier study shows how warmer oceans push animals far away from the tropics. The fossil record confirms that species far from the equator suffered most during the event. The signature of that kill mechanism, climate warming and oxygen loss, is this geographic pattern that's predicted by the model and then discussed in the fossils. The agreement between the two indicates this mechanism of climate warming and oxygen loss was a primary cause of the extinction. The new study combines the changing ocean conditions with various animal metabolic needs at different temperatures. Results show that the most severe effect of oxygen deprivation are for species living near the poles, the top and the bottom guys. And here's this quote. Since tropical organism metabolisms were already adapted to fairly warm, lower oxygen conditions, they could move away from the tropics and find the same conditions somewhere else. But if an organism was adapted for a cold, oxygen-rich environment, then those conditions cease to exist in the shallow oceans. The so-called dead zones that are completely devoid of oxygen were mostly below depths where species were living and played a smaller role in the survival rate, so that's good to know. It was most likely, according to this study, that the warming of the planet. Now, here's another question as well. Was the Permian extinction carried out as the warming of the climate over a very large rate, very quickly over 20,000 years or so. And with multiple pulses like that other article had pointed out, the great Permian extinction from Earth Archives, if you remember, talked about how there were pulses. And maybe what these pulses were was multiple volcanic eruptions, possibly, or was it some kind of event of maybe possibly Pangea forming, and then with that formation becoming this giant supercontinent that had completely varying climate all over it, and this, as a result, just threw the entire Earth off the course for 20,000 years. And the result of all that chaos was a large number of the fish population, the vast majority, 95% of marine life, gone. Just gone. Bye. Dunzo. And that would make sense if you are warming the climate because the fish that are going to be way further out, those are going to be the ones that are going to have a huge, huge issue with. Because, like the study had mentioned, or one of the doctors, or researchers, I should say, researchers, one of the researchers said that it is easier for a warm fish where there already is less oxygen to go to an even warmer place than it is for a fish that's in a cold environment to then move up to a warmer climate because they're not as used to or as adapt to having to already live with that warmer water where they need that less oxygen. Interesting. I don't know the answers, and I think it's a fascinating thing. Kind of where I wanted to take a big picture was this wasn't the only event that almost wiped out the entire world and set back a lot of the species that we have primarily in the water, but also even on land. 70% of the terrestrial species gone forever. You think about what would have happened if, say, there wasn't there was 60% of terrestrial wildlife or 80% of terrestrial wildlife that was gone. What happens then? Do we get to the same place where I'm sitting in front of a computer and speaking to you? I don't know. And maybe we're one of the few planets that around us, yeah, maybe there were some other planets, like maybe a Mars, for instance, where they did have life. But there was another climate related extinction, kind of similar to what I'm thinking that happened with the Permian extinction, a climate related one. What if there was a same instance of that on that planet? Although that planet seems to be an older version of us, and maybe there was an event that happened on Mars for just hypothetical reasons. 60% of their population died, and then maybe another million years later, 95%. And then let's just say they were just never able to recover and they slowly died out over the time. Maybe it's things like that that happen on other planets around us that we'll never know about. We're not going to be able to do this in-depth research on another planet, at least not in my lifetime. Then I think for most people who are listening to this, and listen, unless you're listening into the year 5000, I greatly appreciate it. Um, Hopefully you like the stuff that I put out. But if you're not in the year 5000, many of us are not gonna see us go to this other place. So, with that being said, are there other planets out there where they were not as lucky as we are on this planet? I think so. I think so. Much of the, what you call it, bullshit that we care about today, a lot of the stuff that we argue about and that we think about, we have to be grateful that we had the opportunity to be able to have these conversations because there are things that have happened on this earth where it was dire. It wasn't like, oh, I lost my job or oh, I'm in credit card debt. No, it was the earth was brought to a very, very small number of life. Much of the earth was gone. And these animals, I don't know how intelligent they were. I certainly don't think they were as intelligent as humans. They were able to reproduce and rebuild society. And that extinction led to our creation. And for humans to come out of this, whatever the hell this is, and lead a productive life. And I think part of the responsibility of our species as humans is to spread out, is to say, hey, Mars, we gotta get there. We gotta establish a colony. We have to establish different ways. And the governments, like how the governments are structured, I don't know. That's not for me to figure out, but I just think in general, you have to send people and spread out because what if we are the only ones? What if this is the only place where there's life? It's a scary thought to think about. I don't think we're the only ones, but we very well could be. Up to now, we found zero evidence. Zero evidence. There was that thing with Venus where they were able to detect signs of life or elements of the signs of life in Venus's atmosphere, but we've never seen a creature on another planet. Never seen an alien and had concrete evidence of this is a being, this is a life form on another planet. We've never had that. We've never seen that. There's no evidence. We might be alone in this universe. And everything could just, over a course of a couple thousand years, when you think about the life of our planet, we're talking billions, about 3 billion years, I think. 20,000 years ain't that much. It was just a little boom. In the grand scheme of things change fast. And our planet was brought down to a very low point, and we are extremely lucky that we are able to go back and rebuild and be where we are at today. And I hope that people who listen to this can kind of gather that we're freaking lucky. We're lucky that we lived this long. We're lucky that we've made it this far because up to now, we're the only ones in the universe that we know of that have done this. And I think it's part of our job to spread out, go to a different planet, go to Alpha Centauri B, go to a different star system and start populating. And governments, I don't know. Once again, I do not know about governments, but I know we need to spread love. That's one thing that we can export around the universe. We can spread the idea of family, having people as a unit, having people together, supporting each other. That's something that we can export around the universe. Respect, loyalty, honesty, all these things that we could bring with us. We're just humans. And maybe by the time where we start going out, we've merged with robots in some way. And hopefully, if we do, they take away a lot of the negative emotions that humans have. Greed, the desire to want power over people, money. A lot of these negative things where if somebody says something that's against your political party or your political leanings, you attack them and you feel bad, you feel offended. feel awful. You feel shame. Maybe if we have robots in our heads, maybe we won't be able to feel those emotions at inopportune times and then make poor decisions as a result of those bad things. I sure hope that we are able to come together. And if we do, say 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, thousands of years in the future, I hope that when we do, hopefully, ultimately, start moving out into the universe, the thing that we bring out there is love. And I think looking back at where we've come from and what has almost happened to us, it is part of our responsibility to, if it's happened somewhere else, say we go to another planet and we find that there was previous life on that planet. Should we revive them? Or do we just say, hey, our guys, we're just gonna keep reproducing on this planet. Boom, 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 get to 10 billion people, and boom, next planet. Or do we revive the life? I say revive the life. And then be like, hey, uh, sorry, we're just like kind of colonizing the universe right now, and we just came to your planet. I'm sorry, I don't mean any disrespect. It's just I just came to the planet and I just wanted to like get some resources and stuff. And then the other people like, yeah, but like we've been on this planet for a couple of years. All right, I get that. I get that. But like we just revived you. We just took you out because you guys were Dunza, but we synthesized your DNA and created your entire species again. So I think we deserve some resources. And then they come to a deal. They come to a deal, they figure it out. I don't know. I think maybe in reality, I'm not sure. Not sure what humans are going to be, but if it was today, I don't think those old species are even getting brought up. I think the powers that be are like, hey, let's keep that on the down low. All right. It's just humans here. Nobody else has ever lived here. There's no skeletons or anything. Nobody's got to worry about that. All right. That's how I think it would go right now. There's a lot of interesting things that are happening in our world. And there's a lot of interesting things that have happened in our world. And one thing that I do want to talk about that has happened that is interesting, something that I find frankly surprising, you know? I was like, "Huh. Okay. That is interesting. I didn't realize this. There are certain things that you follow and it's like out of the blue. You say, "Whoa, that's interesting." Right? And a person that I'm talking about is Christian McCaffrey, former first round pick, 2017 eighth overall pick. Currently this season, he is 17th in the NFL in rushing attempts, 19th in rushing yards, tied 23rd for touchdowns, rushing touchdowns, and 23rd in the NFL in average yards per game. Now, I am safe to say, I think it's 4:35 on Sunday, October 30th, when I am recording this right now. The 49ers are facing the Rams currently, and Christian McCaffrey's on that team. The one thing that I wanted to bring up and I wanted to talk about, it was kind of a general thing. And I've talked about this in the past. If you've listened to me in college, you would have heard me give one of these rants. Running backs, paying them, running backs, playing them. I think having a good running game is fantastic. It can change the dynamic of the team because usually first down, what you're doing is you're running. And unless you have a Lamar Jackson at quarterback or a Jalen Hurts, you're not going to be able to be very effective in the run option game. That's not going to really work out. So you need, in most cases, to have a running back that you could run 20, 30 times a game, and he's able to get 4 or 5 yards a carry. That's what you want in a running back. But oftentimes you don't get that. Oftentimes you get somebody who can break out a run every now and again, but every down, they're not as consistent as you would hope. And I feel like that's something that in the past couple of years, you look at currently the top paid running backs in the league. I mean, we could pretty much do anywhere. Let's just do cap hit. I'm going to throw out these names and we're going to talk about some of these running backs and you're going to tell me whether or not you think that these names are among the top teams. Uh Ezekiel Elliott, $18.2 million is his cap hit this year. Dalvin Cook, 11.8, about 11.9 million. Joe Mixon, 11.4. Derrick Henry, 9.3. Saquon Barkley, 7.2. Okay. Let's go person by person. Ezekiel Elliott. A lot of the conversation surrounding him is that his backup is actually a better player than him. His backup is actually going to be the number one uh starter for them moving forward. I mean, it might be Ezekiel Elliott is not as good. I mean, you look at what he's doing currently right now, 7 games, 4 yards a carry, 4 rushing touchdowns, um, 443 yards, 109 attempts. He hasn't been lights out really. Yeah, 4 yards a carry is nice, 4 touchdowns, but I mean, when we're talking about Ezekiel Elliott, we're talking about a guy who had 1,600 rushing yards his rookie season, and then in back-to-back years, he had over 1,300 yards. And last year was a major disappointment, just a major disappointment from Ezekiel Elliott. I know if you look at his numbers, 10 rushing touchdowns is nice, but their offense last year was amazing. They had Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb. They were a fantastic offense last year. And I feel like a lot of what they want to do is be a very pro running team. But Zeke has just not been able to match his earlier success. As you see, injury with the knee, so that's another thing that we don't like. I don't think Ezekiel Elliott is worth. Look, I mean, look at his base salary, $12 million total cash, cap hit at 18 million. Going forward, it's not looking pretty either. Not saying he's a bad player. I'm just saying he's not worth that much amount of money to me. To me. Dalvin Cook, another person. Fantastic running back. One of the best running backs in the NFL currently right now. But the issue with him, he hasn't played enough. He hasn't played enough. He has yet to play a full NFL season. It's just unfortunate. And you see, this year he's been relatively good with the amount of production. 6 games in, 94 rushing attempts, 4.8 yards a carry, 4 rushing touchdowns. Not terrible, but you look back to him at the past couple of seasons, 1,100 yards last year before that, 1,500, year before that, 1,100. Last year, 6 touchdowns rushing. Year before that, 16 touchdowns and 1 receiving. And the year before that, 13 touchdowns rushing. Fantastic player. The issue with him is he's got to stay healthy. And now, this is something you can't blame the Vikings for doing this, but one of the issues is they gave this guy a major contract. He's going to be under contract until 2025 when he's 30. Is he going to be healthy then? Is he going to be worth getting paid $13 million as a cap hit? Do you want a $13 million cap hit in 2025 of a 30-year-old Dalvin Cook? I imagine he probably gets injured more. And once again, nothing against him. I'm not saying this because he's a bad football player. I'm saying this his track record up to this point is that he's been injured. And that's something you have to think about when you're signing somebody. But I don't know how to predict that. So you can't fault the team for that. It's just, hey, this guy was great for us, but he's been injured a lot. That kind of stuff is hard to predict. But I want to go back to some of these other names. Joe Mixon. He's been solid this year. He's had kind of a slow start to his career, but he really has improved overall based on the year. And I mean, you kind of look at what he did last year, 1,200 yards, 13 rushing touchdowns, three receiving touchdowns as well. He's started off this year kind of all right. But his second year in the league was probably his best, 1,100 rush yards, 4.9 yards per carry, eight rushing touchdowns. And you got to remember, he played 14 games this season. So that's pretty good production by him, if I do say so myself. But he's been a really good running back for the Bengals. He's going to be the running back for multiple years at this point. I mean, you look at this is uh oh, I thought this would yeah, it would be a unrestricted free agent in 2025. So that might possibly be a good out for them. Think about two more years probably with him, 27, 28. They'll get out right before he turns 30. It's a good position for the team. If they do want to re-sign him, they can, but they're not going to be re-signing him at when he's 30, like say a Dalvin Cook, and maybe there's more injuries. Joe Mixon's a good running back. And I would say at this point, he's on a good contract, obviously. I mean, you look at the cap hit 11 million, kind of expensive when you compare it to somebody like a Dalvin Cook or a Zeke Elliott, but is it though? Joe Mixon's been all right this year. I mean, you just saw the statistics. Um, is he as good as a Zeke or a Dalvin Cook? Possibly. I mean, even Zeke on a down year is still probably better. And Dalvin Cook, even though he's injured so much, is still a better player than Joe Mixon. So I'm not sure. After that, Derrick Henry, one of the best running backs in the game currently right now. I mean, you look at the numbers that he's put up, the amount of production that he's been able to have since coming to the NFL. He's been fairly consistent over the past couple of years. Unfortunately, injury took him out last year, but 2020, 2,000 yards, 2019, 1,500 yards, 2018, 1,000 yards, and also 17 touchdowns rushing in 2020. 16 total games. He's been up until last year, he was looking to climb to be the best running back in the NFL. And Tennessee has a very good offense for him because one of the good things about not having a super great quarterback is that you're going to run the ball a lot more. And if you have Derrick Henry, just give him the ball and just let him go. With that being said, Derrick Henry is specifically this contract that he's on currently is not terrible. I mean, this year is probably 9 million for a Derrick Henry is something that I would do. But next year you're looking at 15 million. And let's hope that Derrick Henry can stay healthy. That's the main thing with a lot of these players. I don't know. I'm not too certain. I am not too certain. But I think overall that's a fine contract for Derrick Henry for this season. Next year, 15 million, almost 16 for Derrick Henry is still expensive. And last person for a cap hit, Saquon Barkley, 7.2. That's not bad. The issue is it's not a bad number for the majority of these players, but it's in general, how much do you want to be giving money to these players? Because a lot of these guys have injury problems. I mean, the only real person on this list who hasn't had a major injury for the most part is probably a Joe Mixon. You look at the early parts of his career, he didn't start all 16 games. He started about half of them, but he played all of them. Can't say the same for somebody like we just talked about, Derrick Henry, major injuries, and now Saquon Barkley, somebody who has just been absolutely demolished by injuries. And he even hasn't had the best performance since his rookie season. I mean, 2020 and 2021, both injuries. And really tough because last year I thought he was going to be fantastic. I knew he was coming off an injury, but I still felt as though he was a strong candidate for offensive player of the year last year. But he didn't play enough. 3.7 yards a carry, two rushing touchdowns, two receiving touchdowns, about 600 yards. Um, Not what you would expect. 13 games total. This is a guy where you're looking at it, you're like, I don't know. This contract is because he is a first round pick. But that being said, it is the last year. He is a free agent next year. Do they sign him? And if they do sign him, they're gonna give him 15 million a year. I mean, let's see what his market value is. Market value 4 years, 38 million. I don't think he's gonna want to take that. Sorry, you look at some of these other Dalvin Cook got 63 million, 12. Look at this. Some of these other ones like aren't crazy. Could he become the highest paid one? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. He is 25, almost about to turn 26. But I don't know if you do sign him, 9 million for Saquon Barkley isn't a terrible thing. You just have to make sure that he stays healthy. That's the main thing. But now I want to go back to Christian McCaffrey. I actually like this move a lot. You look at where the 49ers even are currently right now. They're a darn good football team. I know recently in the past they've had some issues and had some struggles, but for the most part they've played fantastic defense, and with Jimmy Garoppolo, they've played good on offense. And that's kind of what you need from a team like this, you know? You need them to play well. Let's look currently right now at the rushing attack for the 49ers. A lot of injuries. It's been the story of their season. You look at the early part of their season. Boom. First running back out. Done. Done for the year. Let's look at their leading rushers currently. Jeff Wilson. Okay. He was their backup that came in. Elijah Mitchell played one game for them, and boom, out. He was supposed to be their number one. Unfortunately, he is not. He got injured, but Jeff Wilson was able to step up. I had him on my team in fantasy, and he did very well for me, averaging about a little over 5 yards a carry, over 60, almost 65 yards a game. So he definitely was not bad at all. But you had somebody like Christian McCaffrey, who's played well so far this year. Gonna look at these two games right here. Weeks 2 and 3, 210 yards, 5.25 yards a carry, 6 receptions, 33 yards. Putting up a lot of yards, but unfortunately, he played for the Carolina Panthers. And if you don't know, the Carolina Panthers are not a good football team. However, they did just beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a little while ago. So there is that. But with that being said, Christian McCaffrey still, he's another guy who's had a lot of injuries and really hasn't gotten to his insane level that he once was a couple of years ago. And that couple of years ago was when he was 23 years old, almost 1,400 yards, 15 touchdowns rushing, averaged almost 90 yards a game, 1,000 yards receiving, 4 receiving touchdowns. He led the league in touches and yards from scrimmage, as well as receiving and rushing touchdowns. He was the Offensive Player of the Year, first team All-Pro, and a Pro Bowler. He was insane this season. This is the season that basically got him to be a 99 on Madden. And then unfortunately, since that time, he's missed a lot of time due to injury, which he definitely just, it sucks, you know? You definitely don't want to see that kind of stuff because it discredits kind of what you're doing to a point because it's like, okay, you can give me 75 rushing yards a game, but you're not, in reality, you're not producing for me in other aspects of the game. You need to have to be consistent in the amount of time that you spend on the field. And unfortunately, Christian McCaffrey hasn't done that. And a lot of running backs haven't done that, but that does not mean that you shouldn't invest in them. I think overall, this is a great move for the 49ers. I think the 49ers possibly go out and win their division. Possibly go out and win their gosh darn division. Do have a lot of injuries that are very, very concerning. Deebo Samuel, you want to make sure that guy stays healthy. Defensively, great. Great defensive team. And they've played some tough opponents as well. Look at that Rams game. Come on. Fantastic. Looking back in the past, the Seahawks game is a great win for them too. Seahawks are looking fantastic right now. Now, I don't know whether or not they're a great team, but I don't know. Kansas City Chiefs, who I think is the second best team in the entire NFL, which I'll talk about soon. But you look at the 49ers and where they're currently at, one of the things that they've had is they lose these, they can kind of have these games where, ooh, 88 yards, 88 yards, 50 yards. And these other games where they're boom, popping off. I mean, even against the Chiefs, their run game wasn't that good. Jimmy G had to throw a lot. And I don't know if that's frankly what you want to do as a team. Leave the game up to Jimmy where he has to throw for 300 yards. I'd rather him throw for 250, 275, and them rush for 150, 200 yards. That's kind of the game that I would like to see from the 49ers, especially if they have both Jeff Wilson and Christian McCaffrey kind of going both with the carries. Mostly McCaffrey, but a little bit of Jeff Wilson seasoned in there. I'm not mad at it. But with that being said, I think this is a great move for the team because you look at where they could be currently right now. Let's look at the standings and look at where they're currently at in their own division. They're sitting right there, 3-4. I know the record looks rough. Listen, they haven't been fantastic on every single aspect this year, but they have great potential. If they can stay consistent in the run game and their defense, especially their secondary, can stop these big plays from happening. I'm not worried about a Fred Warner. I'm not worried about that defensive line generating pressure. I need them to stay healthy, and I need the pass defense to kind of, hey, let's clean it up a little bit. And I think they could win this division. Seahawks looking real good. Cardinals looking real bad. Every freaking year, I'm like, you know what? Kyler Murray's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He's gonna win it for them. And I get proven wrong. Before going forward, I do want to say this. I do have to mend part of this next upcoming segment because I'm embarrassed that I even thought of putting these people on here. This next segment, I'll be giving you my power rankings for the NFL. I don't know why I haven't done this. But these are the power rankings that I have for the NFL so far this season. Um, what do you think? N- I'll start from the number 10 spot, which I now looking back am not a huge fan of this selection. At the number 10 spot, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I made this without realizing that they were going to lose to the Panthers, and I would like to take them out. So forget that they're even at my 10 spot. Number 9 spot, the Miami Dolphins. I think another week of Tua getting back into the thing into the schedule, I think he could possibly do some real damage the rest of the season. The defense, not perfect against the Steelers, but good enough. Good enough. Good enough to get stops. And that offense can be one of the more explosive offenses in the NFL. I just want to see another week of Tua. Going forward, I think that this team, the Miami Dolphins, any team below it, they could beat next week. That's kind of how I like to do the power rankings. So, with that being said, Giants, one spot above the Dolphins. I think if they played right now today, the Giants head up, straight up, no spread, no nothing. Just flat out, the Giants could beat the Dolphins today. Offensively, they don't have to put up a lot of yards, but they played the time and possession game. Defensively, they look insanely sound on defense. Great secondary. Xavier McKinney is fantastic. And their rookie, Kayvon Thibodeau, he looks pretty darn good as well. Just an overall great team. And Daniel Jones doesn't have to win them the game every week. He doesn't have to be Superman every single week. He can be the the dual threat quarterback that he is. He is one of the best and one of the fastest runners in the NFL, despite what some people may believe. He's not in the same class as Lamar Jackson, but of those running quarterbacks or quarterbacks that are able to run, he is one of the best in the league. No doubt about it. And Saquon has been fantastic this year as well, as I just talked about him earlier. He's been much better than what you would have thought of coming into this season after all the injuries. Number 7 on the list, Baltimore Ravens. I think the Ravens are offensively one of the more solo focused teams in the NFL. You think of the Ravens and you think of their great running game. And don't get me wrong, they're a great team, but they do have some holes. But I think that just if you're gonna play them straight up, and if you're the Giants or anything, you don't have an answer for Lamar Jackson as a quarterback. They are one of the best teams in the NFL currently as it stands, and what I think is one of the more important is scoring. They're great scoring. They are a very explosive offense because you have the threat of Lamar Jackson where he can drop out of the shotgun and move around and wait for something to develop down the field. He's fantastic. Fantastic. And the one thing I do worry about is their defense. That is one of the things that I do worry about. You've seen them lose late in games. I mean, specifically against the Dolphins. You remember that one early in the season. They lost that. That's a big concern, but they still have amazing players on their defensive secondary. Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, two fantastic players. Marcus Williams, I believe, as well, who they got in free agency, I want to say, from the Saints. Just great overall talent that they have on their team, and I will put them at seventh. Number six, Bengals. I mean, now I would put them much lower. I don't know if they would necessarily be, maybe put them at like number 10 with this Jamar Chase injury. He's going to be out for about 5 to 6 weeks, I believe. But defense, run defense, one of the best in the league. Their defensive line has been playing outstanding. And offensively, it took them a couple weeks to get into the season for them to realize, oh, we're the mother freaking goddamn Bengals. We got Joey Beans, Joey Burrow. He could throw the ball down the field, very accurate, very poised. Our offensive line has been really, really unfortunate. Five, 49ers, looking to be one of the better teams with this addition of Christian McCaffrey. I think defensively, they're one of the better teams in the league. Linebacking core is phenomenal. Defensive line, phenomenal. Just got to get better in that secondary. Number four, Cowboys. Offensively, they could beat you in multiple ways. I know Zeke isn't what he used to be, or but they still have Tony Pollard, who is a fantastic running back. And defensively, they're one of the best in the league. They're one of the fastest in the league. Pass defense, you can't throw to Trayvon Diggs, he'll intercept you. Number three, Eagles. Offensively, they're a great passing team. I just finished watching the Steelers play against them. AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts, crazy good duo. Defensively, they're great as well. They're able to push you around with that defensive line. Raekwon Davis was injured in today's game, so moving forward, maybe their defense isn't as good, but their secondary probably the best in the league and one of the best in years past. Chiefs. Offensively, I'd put them right up there with Buffalo. The Patrick Mahomes probably the best quarterback in the NFL currently. Extremely accurate, and they can put up 40 points like it's nothing. Defensively, they can hold you to 20, and that's all they need. And number one, the Buffalo Bills. Defensively, they're one of the best teams in the league, and they're just a great overall team. Offensively, their run game isn't as strong as you would like it to be, but outside of that, they could put up 40 on you like it's nothing, and they could hold you to 15. Folks, I want to say thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I appreciate you all of the support. Think about what I said today. Maybe it's stupid, maybe it's smart. This is the Zach Moore Podcast. Peace out, folks.